How we doing, YouTube? It's SilverBack here again with the sequel to Dimir Control. This is the list that has gone through several changes. It's survived through Uro and beyond the banning, not banding. That's a horrible mechanic from Magic's past. Anyway, bannings or banning. Again, not banding. What the heck? All right. So Uro got banned. I had the deck ready to post, but once Uro was banned, obviously it changed things a little bit. Not as much as we would have liked because Omnath, 4-color Omnath is still a thing, and Omnath's even worked its way into the Adventures deck now. But regardless, it did change a little bit. It changed the makeup of the deck. And so we got some slots back that was otherwise dedicated to Cling to Dust, Soul Guide Lantern, that sort of stuff. We can now use for good cards, and that's what I did. So this deck, usually I like to keep the decks quite focused. I like to stay around, 10, 11, 12 different cards so that we can draw them consistently. However, with this deck and this style deck, we're kind of I would call a control toolbox. We want to do a lot of drawing, so we want to draw a lot of cards throughout the game and try to draw into our toolbox answers. The majority of the answers are geared towards 4-color Omnath, but we do have some things in there to help with rogues and whatnot. The deck fares very well, and I played tons of games against the Landfall Omnath deck and Adventures, and had quite a good win-loss record against them. I mean, I played at least 30 games, and I was quite pleased with where the deck was at. So I would call this my finalized version of the deck. When I started recording, however, I could not get a game against the Landfall deck to save my life. I played rogue decks, I played mono white decks, I played cleric decks, I played mono blue control decks, I played anything and everything except for the main deck I wanted to show our game against. And I did get a decent game at the end that will feature at the end of the video. We'll have the gameplay going. I'm not going to comment over the gameplay. You can kind of watch it, but I am going to go over the deck while the games are going on. So let's start with our creatures. We have a whole 3 creatures in the deck. Yes, 3 creatures. If you like to turn creatures sideways, this is not the deck for you. So what are we playing? They're mostly utility creatures. We have a 1-of Murderous Rider, and that's mostly for the killing a creature planeswalker ability. But we will put him down if we're running low on life and we need a blocker to gain us some life or what have you. We also play 1-of Gadwick The Wizened. Again, he is a utility card. He is there to draw us a buttload of cards in the late game, or maybe a couple in the early game, and just start tapping some of our opponent's things. He can be a very good card, but he's kind of finicky too. So I wouldn't recommend playing more than 1-of Gadwick. And then we play a 1-of the Lochmere Serpent. Now, I love Lochmere Serpent. He's been a favorite of mine since Eldraine came out. I try to squeeze him in as many of my Dimir decks as I can. You can make the argument that, Zareth Sand could be better in this slot. Voracious Great Shark could do more in this slot. Just a ton of things that you could put in here. Again, Thrix, the Storm, the Raging Storm, or whatever he is, the 5 mana that reduces the cost of your 5 mana spells by 1 and makes them uncounterable. He could do good in this slot too. However, I like Lochmere. It can draw you cards, it can get in damage, it can take away the focus from your face, so I like playing Lochmere. He's done okay by me. Now, on to the Planeswalkers. We play 4 Planeswalkers. I was at 5 at one time. I like 4. I also liked 5, so I think it's more of a preference, and we'll get into that a teeny bit. But the Planeswalkers we play is a 1-of Jace Mirror Mage, who is a lot better than you may think. I mean, he is there just to scry and draw us cards. But again, being more of a toolboxy type deck, we need to draw into what we need when we need it. So having Jace or kicking it, having 2 Jaces down, scrying through our deck, drawing cards when we need them, is really a good thing for this deck. And again, the 2 Jaces, they take your opponent's aggression away from you. When you get a Planeswalker down, they go for that Planeswalker. Even if it doesn't have a great ultimate, they want to get them off the field, Jace included. So even though he's there just to draw you cards, people will target their aggression towards him, and it could save you a turn or two of getting hit by some heavy hitting creatures. We also play one of Liliana, Waker of the Dead. Now, I did have her at 2 before, but she's good, but her ultimate is, in the current meta, not as great as I would like. And really, we just want her, again, to get some cards out of our opponent's hand, remove some threats from our opponent's board, and take away some aggression from our face. I think she's underrated in this meta. I think she does extremely well for what we need. Again, if we need to remove something, a god even, that's indestructible, she can take care of it. And if we want to just get cards out of our opponent's hand, she does that for us too. Now granted, we have to discard along with it, but hopefully we're drawing enough cards that we don't mind losing a land or a frantic inventory or something. We also play 2 of Ashiok Nightmare Muse. Now Ashiok, I did have 3 of him in there. That felt like too many. I was drawing 2 of him a game, or starting the game with 2 of him in hand. So 2 of feels about right, but he is our key finisher. If we don't have Lochmere, we really want to try to finish the game with Ashiok. He protects himself well with his +1, those tokens. They do a lot of work. Their 2/3 bodies are pretty relevant. Milling the cards and exiling them is relevant. And believe it or not, it's not hard to get his ultimate off. You just need to plus him twice, and then I would recommend doing his ultimate right away. And you'd be surprised you can get a Genesis ultimatum, the ultimatum that the Landfall deck plays, the Omnath deck plays, and depending on what you milled, I've gotten that before, along with the Wilds one that draws 5 cards and lets you play an additional land. You play those 2 and a big creature from your opponent's exile pile, and you could end up winning the game pretty easily. Now granted, we don't have as many permanents to put in as they do, but you might get a Jace or a Lochmere or Gadwick or something off of it, and it's all free anyway. You're not paying the 7 mana that they have to pay or whatever, so it's a great card. It does a lot of work. The ultimate's awesome. It's a great finisher. Play 2 of, play 3 of if you really want to see it more often. I like 2 of, though. So that's the Planeswalkers. Now we're going to get into the spells, and there is quite a few of them. First off, removal. We need to be able to remove Omnath and the Lotus Cobra, and basically everything our opponent plays is going to be an issue. So we play 4 of Bloodchief's Thirst. Even at sorcery speed, I feel like this is the best removal card in Standard. Hits Planeswalkers, hits creatures. It can be cheap for the cheap creatures, and you can still hit the big stuff. So 4 of all day long. I like that one. We also play 4 of Heartless Act. Now again, it has a little bit of an issue hitting decks that put 1/1 counters on everything, but we're more focused on the Omnath matchup, and this card is just as good as Bloodchief's Thirst sometimes when we're trying to deal with, again, a Lotus Cobra, Omnath, what have you. Again, the Murderous Rider was in here for removal. Another form of removal, although it's basically exiling the cards from your opponent's hand, is our 2 of Agonizing Remorse. And you can argue for more of those, but I like the 2 of. And when we use it, we're trying to exile the big stuff out of our opponent's hand, trying to get those Omnaths out. I mean, when Omnath hits the board, it's an issue. So you definitely want to target those. Just target the things that you know is going to be a problem, and you should do all right. On to the counter spells. Right now, we don't have many great 2-mana hard counter spells. I don't like the idea of letting them pay mana to get out of your counters. Our games are going to go really long. I've had games go a half hour with this deck, or, at least it felt like a half hour. So you really don't want them to be able to pay 4, pay 3, and basically negate the effect of your counter. So we're going to play the hard counters of a 3 of Essence Scatter and a 3 of Negate. Now it sucks when you're holding an Essence Scatter and they play the Ultimatum, and it sucks when you're holding a Negate and they play Omnath, but it's kind of just something we have to deal with, and that's what all the card draw is for. We also play Neutralize as a 3-mana hard counter. Again, if we're having issues with mana or need to get answer in our hand that's something else, we can always cycle it, so it's got great utility. And we do play the 2 of Whirlwind Denial. It does let your opponent pay 4 to get out of it, but it counters all the abilities and the spells that your opponent's playing. So if they're starting to go off, a Whirlwind Denial can really keep them from getting too far ahead, but it's situational at best. So we're going to only play 2 of. You could argue 1 of. Maybe you want to play 4 Neutralize and 1 of Whirlwind Denial. I don't think that's wrong either. I just play 2 of because sometimes you don't have the 2 blue for Neutralize, where you do have the 1 blue for Whirlwind in the earlier game. So it's kind of a give and take. Another removal spell I guess I should have brought up was the Extinction Event. We play 1 of. That's not so much for the Omnath matchup. That's for the Rogue matchup or the Cleric matchup. Again, I play more on the sideboard. If you're playing a ton of aggro, put more in by all means. But a 1 of is okay for right now in my book. And it is relevant, again, against Omnath. Exiling it is ideal because I've noticed people playing cards to retrieve things from the graveyard. So exiling is always preferable. The only other spells that we play is 1 artifact and 1 technically enchantment. The artifact being the 2 of Maze Mind Tome. I have Tomb written down. That's not right. It's a tome, not a grave. That's great for card selection and card draw. If you're holding up a counter and your opponent does nothing, then you can pay 2 and draw a card. If you do use the counter, you can scry to make sure you get the next counter or removal spell that you need. So it's a great utility card. I did try playing 4 of and taking the 4 of Frantic Inventories out, which I don't know if I mentioned that, but that's there strictly for card draw. You could make an argument for the 4 of Maze Mind Tome over the Frantic Inventories, but even though you draw more cards long term, you have to pay more mana to do it. So again, it's up to what you prefer. I like the 2 of Maze Mind Tome and the 4 of Frantic Inventory, but you might like having 4 of Maze Mind Tome better and using those other 2 slots for more spells, and that's a-okay too. And then the enchantment we play is a 1 of Ashiok's Erasure. Now when that comes into play, you do get to counter a spell and exile it, and they can't play the spell with the same name. So that's great for Omnath, great for Lotus Cobra, great for a lot of things. It's very bounceable, very removable though, so I wouldn't recommend playing a ton of them because you don't want Brazen Bower or something to come in and knock it away and then your opponent's going off again. So 1 of feels about right for me. I really don't think there's any situation where you'd want more. But if you think you do, I'd say sideboard them. So that's the main deck. Again, in the gameplay, it does really well against quite a few decks, actually. We got enough removal that we're relevant against aggro. Again, if you're facing heavy aggro, I would probably recommend more sweepers. If you're playing a lot of rogues, the Witch's Vengeance is a very good sweeper. But more Extinction Events isn't wrong either. I think that this deck, in my experience, does very well against 4-color Omnath. However, there are situations where you got your Ashiok down, you've countered everything, you've killed everything, you've done everything right, and your opponent top decks an Ultimatum and gets an Ugin, an Omnath, a Lotus Cobra, a bunch of lands, and goes off. And even though you did everything right, you lose. And that's because that deck is broken. Omnath is broken. the whole ramp thing in standard is broken beyond belief. So even if you do everything right, I have experienced this more than once myself, you can still lose. So just try your best. Again, I hope these matchups show how good the deck can be. There are times where you might get mana screwed. I've played it too with a lot of the, I know I'll probably get comments, why aren't you playing Hagra Mauling, Gerari Disruption, all those land flip cards? And I tried a lot. I tried playing a ton of them. To me, it was just too much tap mana going on. When I wanted to be able to play things, I was playing tap lands instead. It didn't feel real good to me. You could argue that playing maybe one of Hagra Mauling and maybe a Palaka, just whatever that card is, and Disruption, Palaka Disruption, is that right? Maybe one of those. I did like that card. And playing maybe one or two Gerari Disruption is correct. I myself, in my play style, I just didn't like playing too many flip tap lands. But maybe that's not correct. I don't know. I'd say if you think the deck needs those and it'll give you more answers, and it will, and if you think having more tap lands isn't a big issue, then by all means put them in. For me and my play style and the way I like the deck to feel, it didn't work out for me. So we'll let the gameplay finish out. I hope you're enjoying the games. Leave a comment. Let me know if you like the deck. Let me know if you're playing something similar. Leave a dislike if you don't think it's any good, or if you've played against it and your Omnath 4-color deck destroys it. And if you do play that deck, you are the scourge of Magic. I'm teasing, of course, but I'm not. So, alrighty. Thanks, everybody, for watching the video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next one. Later.
of the dead are the sweetest ingredient.